So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. At this panel, we are going to explore the fascinating world of Web3, a space that is rapidly evolving. We have our distinguished panelists here, Robby and Frederic. Robby, you're the CEO of Micro Brands, and Frederic, you're a partner at the Mubadala Ventures. I will move into the questions, but before, I want to ask, can you please raise your hand up if you are familiar with the term Web3?
Yeah.
All right. Can you please raise your hand if you own any kind of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, not bad.
All right. And can you please raise your hand up if you believe that Web3 is just a buzzword? Robin, you're ready too? Okay, all right. Thank you for your contribution. So let's start our discussion. First, I want to start by asking both of you, what was your aha moment that made you a Web3 believer? For example, for me, it was 2021 when a group of people founded the Constitution DAO to bid for an original copy of the US Constitution. So the DAO raised $42 million in 7 days. Even though we lost, and we lost a bid to a business person, the project onboarded thousands of people, including me. And seeing that a Web3 project can rally thousands of people together towards a common goal made me think that this is not just a buzzword, but it is a paradigm shift. So what was your aha moment for Web3, Robby?
Sure. So I think mine was, frankly, when we first started working in Web3, we partnered with a small hackathon in Vancouver, and they were working on this idea of creating tokenized content in a game. So they actually created the NFT standard. And the game that we created together with them was called CryptoKitties.
CryptoKitties.
And so it was the first implementation of tokenizing in-game content. So cards with cats on them, and you could trade them and own them. But I think the magic part, which for me was with CryptoKitties, but for anybody who's used Web3 at all, I think that aha moment is the first moment that you don't just buy something, but that you sell something. Because you can buy lots of things on the internet, but you can't really sell many things because you don't own them. And so that moment, once you sell something, it's like, oh, wow, look what I just did. I want more of that. And I think everybody generally shares that. So I always try to encourage people, if you've never tried it before, open up a wallet, buy some crypto, and just try it and see what you think.
So the promise of real ownership made you
100%.
Awesome. Frederic, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm a VC, but I'm a technologist at heart, right? So I look at things at the technological level. And for me, I realized that blockchain has a fundamentally different proposition from what we call the Web2, the traditional web. In two different main aspects. One is the ownership side, right? So NFTs have re-established ownership on the internet, which wasn't possible before, right? In the Web2 world, when you post something on the blog, everybody can copy it and replicate it. In the Web3 world, that's not possible anymore with NFTs. So that's the number one. The number two is the possibility to send value to someone across the world in a matter of minutes, right? Again, in the Web2 world, there's no digital money. There's no way of doing this, right? The Web2 world relies on the existing banking infrastructure, which is very old and very slow and doesn't work very well. So the ability to send money across the world in a matter of minutes, and therefore incentivize people at the other end of the world to do, to buy the Constitution or to buy an NFT together or to do something together, that is very, very powerful. And it doesn't exist in the Web2 version.
Awesome. So Robby, you decided to go full on Web3. So Animico is I don't know, how do you describe it? Like, it's a game, it's one of the biggest game studios in the whole world. You're the most active investors in the Web3 space with over 500 investments.
Yes.
Incredible. So how do you see Web3 is shaping the gaming industry?
So, our belief, we have very high conviction. So we think that Web3 is going to, in terms of infrastructure, it will underpin all games at some point in time. So I think the main point of argument is just how long that process will take. But we do think that it's inevitable because when consumers have the ability to actually own their own stuff, you can't take that away from them once you give it to them. Because once you own your own stuff and you have the ability to move it from game to game or buy it and sell it, then you can't just tell people, well, pay the same, but you don't own it, because then they realize that that is actually a false promise. So I think, for us, we think that Web3 is going to be pervasive across the game industry. Although with our investment strategy, we actually invest broadly across all of Web3, not just in gaming, because we do think that this will actually form, the infrastructure for the next incarnation of the internet. So whether it's gaming and entertainment, or it's traditional finance, or it's government, all of these things will be revolutionized by blockchain.
I'm really curious about your thoughts about the intersection of AI and Web3 gaming. But first, I want to ask Frederic about your venture fund and tell us about your investments in the Web3 space.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for Mobile Ventures. I'm a partner there. It's a 450 million euro fund focused on Series A and Series B. We are traditional VC. We invest across sectors. So anything from insurtech, fintech, enterprise software, SaaS. And I'm the partner who focuses on Web3 and crypto. Look, our view is that we've reached a point in the blockchain ecosystem where the infrastructure works, right? The technology actually now works at scale, which wasn't the case, 4 years ago, if we are completely honest. So now there are fast blockchains like Solana. There are layer 2s on top of what are called layer 1s such as Ethereum. So now you can actually build applications that are going to be able to scale at the Web2 scale, right? Millions and millions and tens of millions of users. And we actually believe that blockchain is at this point in its history where you can actually see some real use cases beyond the speculative aspect of it, right? So, Bitcoin was created in 2009. The main use case, so far that everybody knows about, in a good or in a bad way, is the speculative aspect of it. Now, more and more, we are seeing actually people using blockchain in their day-to-day lives, not for speculation, but just for doing business, right? So I've actually launched very recently a YouTube channel called Real Use Cases of Blockchain that actually features everyday people who use blockchain for their daily lives, right? So the killer use case that is out there at the moment and that very few people talk about is stablecoins. Right? So stablecoins are a type of cryptocurrency that is pegged to the US dollars. Right? So you have two main stablecoins, USDT and USDC. Their value is always $1. Right? So there's no fluctuation, so therefore no speculation. And as a result of that, they can be used for payments. Right? So in one of the videos that I've done recently on my channel, I spoke to an entrepreneur in Nigeria who had his own e-commerce website in Nigeria. And he had a number of suppliers to supply his e-commerce website from all over the world, the US, China, and everywhere. And for him to pay his suppliers in US dollars, he would need to have a US bank account in Nigeria. That's completely impossible. For a 25-year-old young entrepreneur, you can't open a US dollar bank account. So instead, he pays his suppliers all over the world in cryptocurrencies, in stablecoins. Right? So people, if he needs to pay $1,000, he sends 1,000 USDC, and the supplier, on the other hand, takes 1,000 USDC, the value hasn't changed, and he turns that into US dollars. Right? So these kind of use cases are happening more and more. Nobody talks about it. Right? The media tends to really focus on the speculation aspect of the business. So, so that's why we are quite excited about this kind of applications.
I like your approach. Like people are getting, confused when you say, "Okay, I'm investing in blockchain," and they're like, "So are you selling or buying crypto? Like, how does it work?" And you're like, "Okay, I'm going to start a YouTube channel and I'm going to educate them." So I love it. So we are still at the very early stages of Web3, as we know. We have a long way to go for the mass adoption. I think we are not even at the mainstream awareness, to be honest. So, Robby, what are the challenges that keeps us away from the mass adoption of Web3, in your opinion?
Sure. I think there are a few challenges. There are obviously technical challenges because the technology is not as straightforward and easy to use as something like your smartphone. And we've gotten used to smartphones as being our primary conduit to accessing online activities, and they're very simple and straightforward. You have payments built in, you have identification built in, because everybody forgets that actually we did the pain of onboarding a decade ago. Because when you originally opened your, whatever, Google Pay wallet or something on Android, or your Apple Pay on iOS, the process was actually very clunky. It often didn't work, and you had to do it many times. If any of you had an Android phone in 2012, it was exactly this process.
Yeah.
And so the problem we have now is because these big centralized platforms have had all of our information for so long, onboarding further into their ecosystems is very straightforward. They already know everything about you. They have all my personal information.
Yeah.
Whereas starting in Web3, you're starting from scratch again. So that means that even if it's only 7 clicks, we're already used to a world of 2 clicks. So there is that slight hurdle. But I think that a lot of that is being weeded out now that we have more maturing products in the space. But I think really the first generation of maturing products are just coming out now because most of those are from businesses that were funded during 2021 and 2022.
So I believe one of the challenges that keeps us away from Web3 mass adoption is, so the technical layer and the application layer were developing all together. But with the Web2, like the technical stack was already done, and then it was ready for the right vertical applications. Here, as you mentioned before, up until 4 years ago, the technical part was still evolving. So I think we will see more and more applications that will keep us closer to the mass adoption. So Frederic, I want to ask you, tell us about the current trends that you see in Web3 investing.
Yeah, so stablecoins, as I mentioned before, is one of the key one. Another key thing which is quite exciting in the blockchain space is a sector called DePINs. So it stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. It's quite a long word, but the idea is that using tokens, you can incentivize people to come together and create networks. And obviously, the most exciting network these days is a network of GPUs, right? So as we all know, AI is exploding. There are not enough GPUs in the world to train these AI models, right? NVIDIA is profiting from this, but even them, they don't have enough GPUs. So nowadays, you have a number of networks and people who come together who are willing to share their GPUs in their computer. Right? So if you're a gamer, you've got a good GPU, you may want to decide that you can share your GPU between midnight and 8 a.m. You're not going to be playing with your GPU. And you're part of this network of distributed GPUs all over the world, and in return, you get tokens, right? That's how these crypto networks are able to incentivize people over the world, is to say, look, I'm going to pay you for sharing your GPU with the network. So I think that's a very powerful idea. I like it as well because for me it links blockchain with the real world and the real value, right? So 1 hour of GPU is going to be worth, I don't know, X amount of token, right? So that's one area that we are looking at quite carefully, and with the AI wave, that should be a sector that should see a lot of growth.
I was going to ask about your thoughts.
Sure.
What do you think about the intersection of AI and Web3? It will be awesome if you can include your predictions for the Web3 gaming space as well.
Sure. So I think the intersection of AI and Web3 is very big. We as game developers see a lot of AI applications just because there's a lot of great AI tools that help us to make games more simply. Particularly generative art is a big one because the creation of artwork in games is one of the most labor and cost-intensive parts of making a game. But there's also a place for things like LLMs. So if you think about having a mid-core or a hardcore game, like a massive multiplayer game, MMO game, often you create a virtual world, and in that virtual world there are lots of characters, and there are lots of what we call NPCs, or non-playable characters. And these are all the background characters, the ones that get run over by the cars, or shot by people, or whatever happens in games. And now, because of LLMs, you can actually bring those characters to life, because you don't have to script their behavior. You can actually give them a natural language model so they can have spontaneous conversations. And it changes the experience of being in an immersive world because you can just stop a pedestrian on the street in the game and have a conversation with them, or just eavesdrop on the conversation they're having amongst each other. So they become much more real. So it really brings that game experience to a totally different level. I think in terms of Web3, we'll see some of this bleed over into Web3, but I think for the near term, the key sort of sea change that we see happening in games is essentially that the shared ownership that Web3 facilitates in games, where we can share some of the benefit of the game with the game players, that actually changes completely the dynamics of how we build user acquisition in games. So the biggest problem we have in the games industry, just for those of you who aren't familiar with games, it's about a $200 billion a year industry, but we spend $100 billion a year on user acquisition, right? It's a terrible model.
That goes to Google and Facebook and like...
That is exactly who it goes to. And the problem is that all that money we spend that goes to Google and Apple and Facebook does not come back to gaming. It goes to shareholders and buybacks. So that's not good for our industry because we hemorrhage 50% of our revenues every year. And we can solve that with Web3 because essentially what happens is we have what those of you who might be familiar with is called an airdrop mechanism. And so if I have a game, I can airdrop assets in my game to constituencies of players and be like, here's free stuff in my game. Come try out the game, right? And that's a cost for me, but the majority of those assets will come back into my game because people will try them. And even if they decide to just cash out those assets and not use them in my game, those assets will still stay in Web3 because they will change them to Ethereum or some other token, and it will grow Web3. So all the money stays in Web3, and I think that's a really important principle.
It's a total game changer. So exciting. So last question for both of you. I don't know if you saw Mark Cuban's tweet about the US elections and the regulation, crypto regulation, but I will quote him here anyway. So he tweeted, if Joe Biden loses, there's a good chance you will be able to thank Gary Gensler, the president of SEC, and the SEC. So basically he says crypto is a mainstay with younger and independent voters, and there's no clarity in terms of regulation in the Web3 space, and the young voters are very, very angry about it, and they're gonna show how upset they are during the elections. So there's a good chance Trump is gonna win just because of the native crypto adapters, users. So how do you perceive these regulatory challenges impacting the broader adoption and the growth of the space? Frederic, you want to start?
Yeah, regulation of crypto is a hot topic, obviously. I think generally speaking, at the political level, I'm talking globally, you know, the global political elite seems to be kind of supportive of crypto with different degrees, right? But never completely against. Now, the issue is that the regulators in the same countries, some of them are actually against, right, crypto. So that's the case of the SEC over the past, few years. The SEC has been a real issue in the US. Now, if you look at the picture at the global level, obviously these teams are very, mobile. And you can have a real arbitrage in terms of regulatory regime between these different regions, right? So Europe is very well placed, right? There's a new regulation in Europe which has been voted already. It's coming into law actually this year. It's called the MiCA regulation. And so we expect to have clarity on what are the crypto assets and all of this, right? In the UK, the Prime Minister said that they want to be a crypto country. Let's see if that actually happens. We'll see. But I can tell you that from the global perspective, the UAE, for instance, has really benefited from the backlash of the SEC in the US. And what I mean is, we've seen a lot of very large, very well-known American companies actually open offices in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, to be able to do more innovative projects, right? So a lot of things around tokenization of real assets, right? So that's a key theme as well. So, I think it's in the public, I can say it. So Coinbase, for instance, the crypto company of the US has now an office in Abu Dhabi, right? So which was unthinkable 18 months ago, right? So, and we've seen many, many other companies doing the same.
Yeah, Coinbase is very, very upset with the SEC. They say, when you don't regulate this industry, it encourages bad people, basically bad actors, which is very bad for the whole industry. Robby, what are your thoughts about it?
So I think it's interesting because Web3 is the first major technological movement or innovation, at least in the 30 years I've been in tech, where the US doesn't matter. It's the first time. Don't care about the US, because actually there are very few important companies in Web3 from the US. If you make a list and just pick any segment in Web3, what are the important companies that you think of? There are not going to be any American companies there. And regulation is part of the problem.
Part of it.
Because it's holding back and making US businesses non-competitive on the one hand. But on the other hand, the great thing about crypto is it's egalitarian. So you actually don't need to rely on venture capital to start a business because you're sharing the value of your business with your community and your customers. And so actually the payment method is built in. So you don't need large amounts of upfront capital from venture funds to start your business. And that's why we see crypto and Web3 generally blossoming in many countries that are, outside the G7, frankly.
Awesome. I have so many questions, but we have to wrap up our discussion. So we talked about the challenges of mass adoption of Web3. We talked about the new developments in the field, especially in the Web3 gaming, and we talked about the regulatory landscape. Hope you all enjoyed. Robby, Frederic, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you here. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.